Hello, Brubs. We're back with Young Adolf by Beryl, Bainbridge, an English writer, and this is her 1978 Magnum Dopus. Where is my knife? There it is. Chapter 22. 3 days into the new year, Adolf started work at the Adelphi Hotel. There being no vacancy in the sculleries or laundry rooms, he was given a pale gray uniform with a high collar edged in green braid and told to make himself useful in the main lounge and foyer. As the third under manager was busy and the second under manager spoke no German, Adolf's duties and obligations were explained to him by a Swiss pastry chef of advanced years. He could carry luggage, deliver telegrams, take orders for morning coffee and afternoon tea, but not for whiskey sodas, and be sent into the town on discreet errands. He was warned that if he was caught using the front entrance of the hotel or seen spitting in the corridor, he would immediately be dismissed and have his wages forfeited for the week concerned. If he was found stealing food from the kitchens, he would be handed over to the police. At all times, he must be clean and tidy and keep his fingernails ready for inspection. Had he understood, if it hadn't been for Alois and his predictable comments, Adolf was inclined to quit there and then. Haughtily, he nodded his assent. The instant he stepped through the pass door into the body of the hotel, he was in his element. His feelings were those of the natural swimmer who, until that moment, hadn't known the exact location of the river. Sinking into the carpet of dusky pink that rolled 100 feet across the marble floor, he floated between islands of small tables and elegant sofas to the foyer beyond. Apart from his beloved opera house in Vienna, he had never seen so beautiful an interior. For once, Alois had spoken the truth. Built to accommodate passengers in transit for the Atlantic run, the hotel itself, with staterooms paneled in mahogany, gymnasium and cafe Parisien, Mary Pickford saloon, and companionways railed in shining brass, resembled a luxurious ocean liner. What do you got, Brobs? In the vast lounge hung with mirrors, the Venetian chandeliers trembled as below stairs in the boiler room. They stoked the furnaces night and day to raise steam in the Turkish bath. No sooner had Adolf reached the flight of marble steps that led down into the foyer than a gentleman making for the glass doors of the smoking room hailed him and, pressing a coin into his hand, told him to buy a certain newspaper. Inquiring of a page boy where he might find such an item, Adolf was pointed into the street and shown a kiosk below the level of the cab rank. What do you got, Brobs? Having purchased the newspaper, Adolf was about to run up the steps, past the commissaire, past the commissioner, when he remembered he must use the side door. Running, he climbed the hill, entered the tiled corridors, and sprinting through what he took to be the pass door, found himself in the kitchens. In this hellhole of noise and heat and preparation, he frantically sought redirection. A youth in a soiled apron apathetically led him down a further maze of corridors. Hello, Bobs! Hurtling at last through swing doors, Adolf emerged into the lounge, sped panting across the carpet, and entered the smoking room. He was given a sixpenny tip for his pains, and on muttering his thanks to the generous gentleman who stood before him, was addressed in his mother tongue, heavily accented. My name is Monsieur Dupont. Play fair by me, and I will not disappoint you. Each morning I require the same newspaper. I desire it to be delivered at precisely 9 o'clock, when I shall be in the mauve breakfast room. At 4 o'clock you will fetch the afternoon edition. At that hour I shall be either in my suite on the first floor or in the lounge. I prefer my newspaper to be folded into 3 sections, like so. Nothing, though he had not cared for the word fetch, Adolf promised he would do his best. I like your style, M. Dupont, who, in a gray morning suit, and black silk tie, was every inch the gentleman. I believe myself to be a good judge of character. You're a man to rely on. Pale with gratitude, his face tinted blue and gold from the reflection of the stained glass windows, Adolf left the smoking room and hung about the foyer. He was annoyed with himself for having been so eager to oblige, running like a rabbit uphill and down dale, and yet in his hand he held the rewards of such servility. His mind boggled at the thought of the money he might earn if he fetched regularly for M. Dupont. At the end of the week he would hand over every penny of his tips and wages to Alois. He couldn't wait to see the astonishment on his brother's supercilious face. With this first sixpence, however, he resolved to buy Pat a small clockwork train. As it happened, when Adolf arrived at the kiosk at 5 to 4, he realized he must use a portion of the sixpence if he was to purchase the newspaper at all. Upon returning to the hotel and arriving in the lounge, gasping for breath, he found M. Dupont seated at a round table, enjoying a pot of tea and a dish of muffins. M. Dupont took the folded newspaper, thanked him, and reminded him of the need for punctuality. 9 o'clock sharp, he repeated, not a second before or later. Annoyed that M. Dupont, despite his earlier claims, had proved to be a disappointment, and ashamed to loiter lest it should seem he was begging, Adolf walked away. In the evening, when Alois asked him if he had received any gratuities, he replied huffily, as he supposed he was to be paid wages for the work he was doing, he didn't expect to be given tips. Indeed, he would refuse them if offered. The following morning at 9, he again paid for M. Dupont's newspaper. In return, M. Dupont thanked him. By mid-afternoon, Adolf was thoroughly annoyed with himself. He wondered if he should seek the advice of the head porter. He had just made up his mind to confront M. Dupont and ask him outright for the halfpenny needed to purchase the afternoon edition, when M. Dupont appeared on the steps of the foyer and beckoned him. Drawing him to one side, he slipped a shilling into his hands and a large key. Go to my suite, he said. In the entrance hall, you will see a brown paper parcel on a chair. Take the parcel to number 89 Pitt Street and ask for Mr. Brackenbury. Deliver it personally into Mr. Brackenbury's hands, then return the key to me. I shall be in the Turkish bath. And the newspaper, said Adolf. Shall I bring it? Shall I also bring the newspaper? No, M. Dupont said. I won't need the newspaper today. Pitt Street, Adolf found, was in the Chinese quarter of the city, below the unfinished cathedral. Number 89 was a Chinese provision store situated next door to a laundry. Thinking there was perhaps some mistake, he walked up and down outside for several minutes, watched by 4 Lascar seamen, who sat barefooted on the steps of the house opposite. Clutching his parcel, he entered the shop and retreated instantly, overcome by the smell of dried fish. An elderly Chinaman stared down at him inscrutably from a first-floor window. Herr Brackenbury, called Adolf nasally, holding his hand over his nostrils. The Chinaman withdrew and closed the window. Nonplussed, Adolf was about to return to the hotel when a stout man with a cut over one eye came out of the store. Brackenbury, he announced abruptly. Adolf held out the parcel. Know anything? Said the man, not taking it. Adolf stared at him. Righty-o, cried the stout man, and making up his mind, he snatched the parcel from Adolf's hand and doubled back inside the store. The Lascar seamen rose from the steps, humming like mosquitoes. As Adolf walked away from number 89, he was aware of the little brown men padding along the pavement in pursuit. Only when he had turned along the genteel respectability of Rodney Street did they cease to follow him. Glancing nervously over his shoulder, he watched them standing in a row, no bigger than children, watching his departure. M. Dupont was lying half naked on the Egyptian couch inlaid with brass. Groaning, he asked Adolf what Brackenbury had looked like. Battered, said Adolf. His brow was slashed by a knife. Mon Dieu! Cried M. Dupont, starting up from the couch in alarm. Sweat oozed from the folds of his belly. Hastily, Adolf assured him it was an old wound. How tall? Demanded M. Dupont impatiently. Adolf described a large man of some weight, wearing a checked motoring coat. That's him, said M. Dupont, relaxing. Did he say anything? Nothing I understood, confessed Adolf, and he laid the key to M. Dupont's suite on the mosaic floor of the Turkish bath. One shouldn't take too much notice of appearances, remarked M. Dupont, closing his eyes. Things are never as they seem. You don't have to tell me, Adolf said. Only recently a dear friend of mine mentioned that his son, to all intents and purposes a man, was to be seen in a lifeboat dressed as a woman. The fact that Herr Brackenbury was living next door to a Chinese laundry make me necessarily conclude that he was a laundryman. Who the devil are you? Asked M. Dupont, opening his eyes in alarm. Adolf assured him he was a penniless student, forced by his stingy half-brother to seek employment. That's enough, cried M. Dupont testily. I must be allowed to perspire in peace. Chapter 23, a rather short one. Before sitting down to supper, Adolf presented Bridget with a 3-penny bunch of violets. Pleased, she placed them in a jam jar in the center of the table. Adolf hinted that if he were in charge of management at the hotel, he would think of a more efficient system of serving light refreshments in the lounge. I've run miles, he complained, from table to cash deck and back again. I'm allowed to serve tea and accept payment, but I'm not authorized to carry loose change in my pocket. I have to dash the entire length of the room to price the necessary coppers out of the cashier behind the swing doors. Is that prize or price? I'm gonna guess it's prize. You don't have to dash, cried Eloise, who wasn't due at the hotel until 9 o'clock. There's no need to be dramatic. Indeed, I have to, snapped Adolf. I have been told that unless I hurry, customers may leave the hotel either without paying or without signing the appropriate chit of paper. You know nothing of the problems, Eloise said. Nothing at all. One day at the Ritz in Paris, every waiter with 10 shillings worth of change in his purse made as one man for the exit and was never seen again. My point exactly, shouted Adolf. Only I am referring to the guests, not the waiters. Under the present system, my work is time-consuming and exhausting. I'm continually on the trot. Bridget, seeing that Eloise was growing red in the face with indignation, remarked that it was obvious that Adolf was a success at the hotel. She looked admiringly at the violets. Moderately, yes, agreed Adolf. I have been in a position to do someone a small favor. He explained how M. Dupont had given him his key and how he had gone to the first-floor suite and collected a parcel, which he had later delivered to luxurious business premises somewhere in the region of the Cotton Exchange. Didn't they tell you the rules? Demanded Eloise. You aren't allowed inside the rooms. What was the fellow's name? Adolf refused to give him any more information. Eloise should mind his own business. He had been told he might be sent on discreet errands. It would be far from discreet to divulge the name of the guest concerned. You'll be seen, threatened Eloise, and reported, there are house detectives permanently on duty in the corridors. Adolf said he had seen no one in the corridors, and in any case, oh, man, as long as he refrained from spitting, he had nothing to fear. You're a bloody fool, shouted Eloise. You are wet behind the ears. Chapter 24. I gotta read it, so regardless of the length. For the rest of the week, Adolf continued to buy M. DuPont his newspaper morning and afternoon. Some days he was neither paid nor tipped. On others he received a shilling. As his rate of tipping had increased, he felt he was breaking even. On Friday he was again approached by M. DuPont and given the key to the upstairs suite. Again he delivered a brown paper parcel, somewhat larger and rattling as he carried it, to the scarred Mr. Brackenbury in Pitt Street. This time, upon returning to the Turkish bath, he was urged to take a florin from the pocket of M. DuPont's toweling robe? Or is that toweling? He was tempted to grovel on the wet tiles out of gratitude. His working day, which began at 6:30 in the morning and ended at 5:30 in the evening, was further prolonged on the Saturday when he was ordered by the under-manager to stay until midnight. 2 waiters were off sick, and a third had been taken into custody the previous day for secreting a chicken in aspic under his bowler hat. Or is that I guess that's secreting, not secreting. It would have been cool if he secreted the chicken. Though tired, Adolf was glad to oblige, for it meant he would be in the hotel at the same time as Meyer. He hadn't realized that he would also be working with Eloise. It irritated and offended him to watch his brother, a napkin over one arm, deferentially emptying ashtrays into a paper bag. "Go away," cried Eloise, seeing Adolf in the doorway of the smoking room. "You have no right in here." "I go where I please," retorted Adolf. "I'm not bolted to the floor." However, he left almost at once, not liking to observe his... The struggle's real here. His brother performing such a degrading task. It gave him no pleasure to think that old man Hitler, who at Aloise's present age had been rising fast in the civil service, would turn in his grave to know that his eldest son was a part-time salesman of razor blades and a cleaner of ashtrays. It's different for me, thought Adolf. "I know where I'm going," though at that moment he was merely carrying a plate of ham sandwiches towards a party of naval gentlemen seated in the far corner of the lounge. He was further disillusioned later in the evening when, having been sent into the lilac supper room to deliver a cablegram, he saw Meyer on a raised dais wearing a paper hat and accompanying on his violin a young woman who, dressed as if for sunbathing, was singing a song about a policeman. He fled, unable to be a witness to Meyer's shame. At midnight he fully intended to avoid both Eloise and Meyer and go home alone. But at 11 o'clock, Eloise came into the foyer and said that Meyer wanted to see him urgently. Would he go to B corridor, below stairs, immediately? Mystified, Adolf did as instructed. He found Meyer still sporting his paper hat, walking up and down in some agitation. "I must explain," Meyer said and paused. "There's no need," Adolf told him gently. "A man must work. Who am I to pass judgment?" "You mustn't be at a loss for words." Puzzled, Meyer stared at him. He said he thought Adolf had misunderstood his meaning. The matter was a delicate one, but for a certain happening, he would never have involved him. As things stood, he had no choice. Certain persons whom he couldn't name had for some while been involved in a certain type of activity. There was no time to go into details. Sufficient to say that it was socially important work with political undertones. "I must stress," said Meyer, "the need for courage. The work is dangerous. It's only fair I should tell you this." "I'm not afraid," asserted Adolf, though his heart was beginning to thump in his breast. Placing an approving hand on the young man's sleeve, Meyer continued, "Tonight I received information regarding certain events that may take place within the next 2 hours. I cannot leave here until 12:30 at the latest. A message must be delivered before then to a certain person. You yourself, after a week's training running backwards and forwards across the lounge, are the one person capable of carrying a message at speed. Will you do it? Flustered, Adolf asked, "This certain person, will he be in a certain place?" "In the basement of our house," revealed Meyer. "It is none other than Mary O'Leary. Tell her to go to the doctor's house and arrange for drinks all round." "Drinks all round," repeated Adolf. He was beginning to suspect that Meyer had already been drinking. "Mary O'Leary will understand what I mean. Will you do it?" "I cannot refuse," said Adolf, "though after a hard day's work I do feel—" "Rest assured," Meyer interrupted gravely, nodding his head in his paper hat, "that what you are doing is of the utmost importance. You are furthering a just and noble cause, young Adolf." And not a word to Eloise. 2 minutes before midnight, the ends of his trousers tucked into the tops of his threadbare socks, Adolf slipped out of the side door of the hotel. Keeping his elbows close to his ribs and breathing rhythmically, he began to run strongly up Brownlow Hill. All right, this is going to have to be the last chapter. Chapter 25. After conveying his message to Mary O'Leary, Adolf was all for going upstairs and falling asleep. He had been on his feet, and running on them at that, for almost 18 hours. Mary O'Leary, judging by the mottled complexion of her face and neck, had been sitting dozing by the fire for most of the day. "You're needed," she said firmly. "You're too fond of lying down. Come along." Protesting, Adolf followed her up the area steps into the street. He couldn't think what sort of important social work Mary O'Leary could possibly be involved in. He had attended many meetings in Vienna of various political persuasions and had never come across anyone remotely resembling this mountain of a woman, dressed in rags, the backs of her hands so covered in black hair that they seemed to be encased in mittens. "Let me take your arm," she said. "Support me. We will look less conspicuous, it being now 1 hour into Sunday morning, and a day of rest ahead." There were still people in the streets, many of them walking the worse for drink or hanging on to railings, too confused to advance further. When they reached the doctor's house, they found the front door already open. Peering anxiously into the road was a youth with curly black hair. Sighting Mary O'Leary, he jumped up and down and shouted, "He's inside, missus." Mary O'Leary marched past him and down the hall without a word. Propped against the wall was a rusty bicycle. Upon entering the back room, they were greeted not by Cephalus, but by the man Adolf had surprised leaping through the wall in Stanhope Street. Though his head was no longer bandaged, he wore on his feet those unmistakable golfing shoes first seen in Meyer's wardrobe. Set on the table in front of the window, Adolf was disgusted to see the plate of custard tarts offered to him more than a month ago by the doctor. "You've heard," said Mary O'Leary. "Yes," the man said. "Is it drinks all round?" "The sooner the better. I'll be off on the bike. You sit here until I send word." The man left the room at once and was heard calling to the boy at the door to take the bicycle down the steps. "I'll say good night," said Adolf. "You'll stay where you are," ordered Mary O'Leary. "There's work to be done before long." She inspected the cakes on the table. Finding them too far gone to be eatable, she shrugged and, standing on the tips of her massive boots, reached up to adjust the working lamp that hung from the ceiling. Adolf sat on the floor in near darkness. Tired as he was, he couldn't sleep. He wondered what Meyer had meant by danger. Was it imminent, or to come later? Would he be set upon by thugs or shot at from a distance? He devoutly hoped the front door was securely bolted. "What are we to expect?" he demanded at last. "Who are we waiting for?" "The nightmen are coming," said Mary O'Leary, perched on a beer crate beside the hearth. This sentence, once understood, struck Adolf as sinister in the extreme. His eyes widened in alarm. "I haven't the words." "Oh, said Mary O'Leary. "Meyer will explain later." An hour passed. Mice could be heard squeaking behind the skirting board. Then footsteps sounded in the hall, and the curly-headed boy burst into the room. Argyle Street, he shouted, off Scotty Road. Speaking directly to Adolf, he asked, are you the foreign fellow? He is, said Mary O'Leary, bustling to the door, pardon. Meyer says he's to come with you, missus. The boy told her. Stumbling down the steps, Adolf thankfully left the doctor's house. He had no idea where they were going, but he thought he stood more chance of survival in the open. Once into the road, the boy disappeared. Beyond the black pit of St. James's Cemetery, the lights of ships anchored in the river swung up and down against the sky. Mary O'Leary led Adolf back along the streets he had so strenuously run through earlier that night. Even at this hour, the windows of the Adelphi Hotel blazed like beacons. The revolving doors still spun. They traveled the length of Lime Street and up the steep incline of London Road. Argyle Street was situated to the north of Scotland Road, an area of the city so wretched and notorious that Adolf was glad to be accompanied by Mary O'Leary. He had the feeling their progress was being closely watched. It seemed to him that they were both preceded and followed by a dark figure who from time to time darted away down side streets only to reappear either further ahead of them or some way behind. And yet this person or persons kept their distance. Though Adolf sighed heavily on occasion, signifying his exasperation at being expected to traipse about the town in the middle of the night, he felt curiously elated. No one, as far as he could remember since he was 16 years old, had needed or asked for his assistance. He had always been shy and introverted, more so after the death of his mother and the death of his hopes, when they had deliberately barred him from the art academy. People hadn't often told him jokes or sent him postcards when they went on holiday. Secretly, he thought it was because he was disliked. Of course, Meyer had intimated he had no choice. It was inconceivable to think of Alois in his Homburg hat, jogging hotfoot on such a mysterious errand. But perhaps Meyer had truly seen through the cold exterior to the warm heart within. It was a queer feeling to be trusted. Mary O'Leary was guiding him down a narrow street of workmen's cottages. It was unnaturally quiet. Despite the thin drizzle that had begun to fall, a stench of garbage and something worse rose from the muddy ground. Not a soul was about, and only one solitary lamp burned at the end of the street. Adolf had heard stories of the fearful happenings in this sector of the city, the drunkenness, the fights, the suicidal women who ruptured their wombs with the tip of a broken bottle. There wasn't a single inhabitant, according to Alois, who wasn't destined for the workhouse, the prison, or the infirmary. The police, if present at all, patrolled in groups of 3. Suddenly, Mary O'Leary said urgently, "Hold fast to my arm and tilt your face to the lamp." Adolf didn't understand her. As he hesitated, standing there in the middle of the gloomy street, he was encircled by shadowy figures and torn abruptly from her side. Jostled and manhandled, numerous fingers clawing at his throat, he was pushed against the wall. "Leave him," he heard Mary O'Leary cry. "He brought the message. Leave him be." Her words were repeated by a dozen voices. He brought the message. He's the fellow that brought the message, and then he was being supported on either side, a hand under each elbow, and run down the street at such speed that his ankles knocked together. Finally, he was lifted from the ground and borne, coat ends flapping, and the head jiggling violently on the stem of his neck, around a corner and into a cobbled court. Narrowly escaping decapitation, he was carried through the doorway of a house and dropped on his feet. He faced a broken table, shored up at one end by a pile of bricks, behind which Meyer sat, writing on a piece of paper by the light of a candle. Excellent, cried Meyer at the sight of him. Pardon and bless me. Good work, young Adolf. When his eyes had grown accustomed to the dim light, Adolf made out Cephalus standing in a corner of the room, clutching a torch and a Gladstone bag, presumably containing medical supplies. Beneath the sink, under the window, huddled several women, holding children in their arms. Meyer seemed to be giving detailed instructions. Giving detailed instructions to the half-dozen men who had escorted Adolf to the house. At his elbow rode a shillelagh. When the men trooped out of the door, the candle flickered in the draught. There's little time for talking, said Meyer, addressing Adolf, who leaned more dead than alive against the sink. The night men are coming. Go up on the roof and keep watch. Cephalus will explain what is expected of you. Pointing his torch downwards, the doctor preceded Adolf up a flight of stairs that threatened to collapse under their weight. On a torn mattress on the floor lay a row of children, turned on their sides and all packed the same way like sardines in a box. Flashing his torch upwards, exposing a ceiling that in places was open to the elements, Cephalus ordered Adolf to climb on his shoulders and push up the skylight. I haven't the strength, complained Adolf. I'm not a mountaineer. Ignoring his protest, the doctor squatted on his haunches and jabbed him in the shins with the torch. Adolf scrambled onto Cephalus's back, gritting his teeth and held tight to his ears. Raising together in an unsteady pyramid, they swayed back and forth, searching for the trap door. Moments later, one elbow badly scraped, Adolf levered himself through the aperture and, lifting the Gladstone bag and torch after him, emerged onto the roof. Clinging to the chimney breast, he saw in the distance the lamps of Scotland Road, and beyond, luminous against the dark clouds, the glittering rectangle of the Adelphi Hotel. Cephalus leaped for the edge of the trapdoor and athletically hauled himself upwards by the strength of his arms. Coughing and wheezing, he wriggled his way onto the broken tiles and rolled towards the guttering. Stay in one place, pleaded Adolf. The roof will come down. Fleetingly he remembered, clinging there in the rain, how as a boy of 18 he had prayed for a second Boer War. He had felt that until his life was blown sky high by some monstrous explosion and fell earthwards in differently arranged pieces, he would never, ever find himself. Move over, ordered Cephalus. You look north and I'll look south. Keep your ears open. For what? Asked Adolf crossly, unable to let go of the chimney stack. Footsteps, said Cephalus. Movements. When the call comes, drop through the trapdoor like a shooting star and shout to Meyer beneath. Then hand the children up to me. He began to prowl about the chimney, slithering on all fours in the darkness. A tile bounced from the roof and fell into the court below. Take care, called a voice, and the beam of a torch flashed for a moment somewhere to the right. At this rate, whispered Adolf, I won't have to wait till the call comes, nor will I need to use the trapdoor. He could make no sense of it. He couldn't understand why the children were required to be lifted onto the roof. Was he about to witness some massacre of the innocents? He waited at least 10 minutes before intimating to Cephalus that if it was all the same to him, he preferred to go indoors. I've been working since 6 o'clock this morning, he explained, and my constitution is far from robust. I'm a martyr to bronchitis. Keep your voice low, you little twerp, hissed Cephalus. The word, though unfamiliar to Adolf, wasn't, he thought, an endearment. He slid downwards until his buttocks rested upon the tiles and his feet sloped towards the guttering. If he was quiet and made no trouble, perhaps the doctor would cease his perilous meanderings about the stack. It was possible, Adolf hoped, to fall 20 feet and live. Somewhere behind him a match was struck. He caught the faint drift of tobacco smoke. Listen, whispered Cephalus, it may be that in most cases it is better for the children to be taken into the care of the authorities. They get rid of the lice and they cut them out of their undergarments. But emotionally, it is disruptive and cruel. Do you agree? I do, said Adolf. It's not overcrowding in the bed that causes contagious diseases. It's the state of the drains and the Catholic Church and the rats coming through the woodwork. It's the lack of food. How do they expect a man to provide adequate nourishment for his wife and himself, let alone 14 children? He could work harder, suggested Adolf recklessly. Work harder, cried the doctor. His voice from behind the chimneys rose in outrage. What is that supposed to mean? By my information, until this week, you've spent the greater portion of your time flat on your back. Do you know that at the gates of the docks at 5 o'clock every morning, they fight like animals for the privilege of working for 3 shillings a day? I spoke without thinking, said Adolf hastily. I'm ashamed. He was desperately afraid the doctor meant to leap on him and dash him to the cobbles below. He said again, and with as much feeling as he could muster, I spoke without thinking. A child whimpered in the room beneath. The doctor grunted and fell silent. And that's the end of chapter 25 and the end of this reading. How many more pages are left? 22 pages left? No. 30 pages. Just about 28 pages. And that's the end of young Adolf for the day.